This is modern day black storytelling. Let's talk about it. Welcome everyone to another edition of the LeftEye of Justice. But first, introductions are in order. It is I, the double whose door is always open. Gandalf without the gray or the white, cause I'm all black. Jordan LaForge, captain this enterprise and opening my eye to justice. I am LeftEye E.G.O. Introducing this guy, who's the global man of mystery, whose whereabouts are always it's complicated and unknown. We have the man, the myth, the legend, in the flesh, or is he Diego Orlando? Good sir, how
If
are you
that's my
today?
real name.
Okay, guys. If that is his real name, indeed, we're going with Diego Orlando. And guys, we're actually going to talk about a movie review because we are going to be contrasting that with our first edition of LeftEye of Justice. If any of you have not seen it, we will put the link for that one in the description as well. But it was talking about the American Society for Magical Negroes and some of the questions and the fallout that we had from that. And I believe that it was Diego Orlando at that time that noted that, in your words, that was the story of the house Negro. And that the problem we are facing now is the fact that we actually don't have a story for the modern black man. And so, with that, enter the movie American Fiction. So, we are going to be discussing that movie in terms of its contrast to how, the Magical Negroes was marketed, as well as some of the insights with it as first. But we're going to give you guys kind of a synopsis of the film, some of the more interesting points of the film, and our analysis as well. Diego Orlando, do you feel comfortable giving a slight summary of the movie?
Diego Orlando's always okay.
Go ahead, good sir.
So the movie American Fiction, it's pretty interesting. It's the story of a writer who can't sell a book or enough books, um, because being black and a writer and an intellectual in the film anyway is illustrated as, if you're not following the stereotypes or the expected narrative for your complexion, then we don't want to hear from you. They're trying to set him up as actually being quite a good writer, better than some, enough to have more recognition. And like, it's full of scenes where he's in the bookstore, which I've personally experienced walking through a local Barnes and Noble. No matter the subject matter, if you're a black author, you show up in the African American section of the bookstore, even if your book is about something that isn't. You could write a book on Buddhism and meditation, and it won't be in the New Age Buddhism, New Age religion section. If you're a black author, it could be in the African American section, which essentially makes it hidden, for those looking for subject matter. And so there's like a scene where he gathers all these books from the African American section and takes it to the section for which the book is about. He's like, there's nobody black in the book. The only thing black about this book is the ink. And they're like, well, you're an African American author, so you go with the African American section. Um, without a lot of spoilers. And that's generally the premise, is sort of exploring this idea that if you don't support the stereotypical narrative, then you don't get to you don't get you don't get the you don't get it. You don't get it. Um, which definitely hits close to home for um, those of us who've ever been told they weren't enough of what they actually are. And in this current social climate of people deciding or identifying as something that in reality they're not, um, it's a good time for the modern voice to speak up and say, hey, I tell you, I give you the definition of who I am. You don't tell me what I'm supposed to be, kind of thing. So, that's the short, spoiler free experience.
Yeah, that's actually pretty accurate. Without going into the spoilers, I know that between Diego Orlando and I's conversations, when anything that I've seen that's black that started out one way and then inadvertently becomes stereotypically black within a short time, I would always joke and say it's always someone that's a homosexual that's in charge of marketing. And I would always joke about this. And that was the funny thing. I'd always be like, that's the good idea, that's the good idea, or maybe, or maybe, or maybe. And then they would say something completely stereotypical. And that was my joke. I had no basis for saying it. It just sounded like something that someone like that would say. And when we're watching American fiction, this book has gotten somewhat popular that he's put over. His stereotypical book that he's made is an overnight sensation, and so he doesn't think it should be this big, but they're trying to market the movie for it, and they're saying, well, hey, it's gonna be great. We've got Michael B. Jordan. He's already cast in the lead, and we're gonna have him wearing one of those stocking caps that you guys wear over your head. And he's like, the main character's like, a do rag. Oh my god, that's exactly what it was. I'm glad you said it and not me. And I'm laughing the most hysterically because it's like, okay, it's not just me that says that. It would be that person that says something that's stereotypical. And I would say that for me was almost one of the more vindicating parts of the movie. I told Diego Lando I hate the phrase "I feel seen." All right, for someone that's got one good eye, I'm not gonna. I kind of half feel seen everywhere I go anyway. But I don't like using the phrase. But it was one of the phrases for a movie where I said, "Hey, I understand that kind of struggle or that kind of it's not necessarily a fight or a struggle of sorts, but that kind of way that you feel that you have to move in a certain environment." So I will say that.
I felt seen
Um,
after watching Blade
let's see. What are your
and
pronouns,
Blade
Diego
2.
Orlando?
Huh?
What did you say your pronouns were when we talked about this?
Day Walker.
I would say, in watching it, what were your thoughts on just comparing? I know that for people that have seen it, the movie, The Hollywood Shuffle, it's a 1980s movie by Robert Townsend. And in the movie, he's a guy that works at the post office, and they offer him this role to be in movies in Hollywood, but he's got to be this really stereotypically black character. And so he actually tries to figure out, should I do this movie and be stereotypically black, or should I stay and work at the post office? And
Well,
I
I
know
didn't
that
think he worked
he's
at the post office originally. He
he
was an
didn't.
actor. He was an actor, and he was a struggling actor.
Oh, okay. So it
And
was okay.
and to get roles, he was being offered these roles that questioned his morality about who he was as a person. And his grandmother would say, "There's always work at the post office."
Great.
And the movie ends with him doing a commercial, so he's still acting
Okay.
for the post office, and he repeats the line, "There's always work at the post
At
office."
the post office.
And the point is, if you hear the arguments by individuals within the entertainment industry about reasonable pay and roles and so forth and so on, the message was, if it's just about finding work, you don't have to. Denzel Washington, sitting amongst other
Mm,
filmmakers, not just Martin Scorsese and everything else, he says, "Look, guys, we're not trash men. We actually get to do something fun and get paid doing it. This isn't brain surgery. Let's not take it so." He was kind of like, we can't take ourselves that seriously. We play pretend for money. We entertain people. That's what we do. We don't.
right.
We're not saving lives every day. And it's sort of like, with such conversations and arguments about, well, we don't get paid enough, we don't have the right roles, well, I deserve. It's kind of like, what are you really providing the world? You
Hmm.
know. So if it's a question between your integrity and what you can cause or influence within the known world, What should you choose? And if you're like, well, I need to work, well, there's always work at the post office. There's always, the idea is that is not a justification for being a saboteur to your culture, to yourself, to your community. That money doesn't get to be the defining factor. It's kind of like more recent stuff, Cat Williams, Monique, and everything else.
Yeah.
It's like,
Oh, go right ahead. Yes.
unless you like broke, if you sitting on serious cash, and I've heard stories, and I'm familiar, as in I know someone who knows someone, with someone who doesn't get any major roles, just went into Hollywood to act and only got bit roles, small roles, maybe one line or two line, and is a multi-millionaire.
What?
So they're not getting, you're not getting paid a little bit in the entertainment industry. You're getting paid pretty decent. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
For the grind and everything else. You're not getting the notoriety. I mean, you would never, if I said his name, you would have no idea who I was talking about. Even if I pointed out, oh, he was here, you would like, I don't remember that guy.
Okay.
But because he's steady working and enjoying the fact that he's getting paid to be an entertainer, and we know a lot of these actors where it's like, oh, I remember that guy from that movie. I remember that guy from that show. And they've never had a starring role in anything, but they're doing well, right?
Right.
So when someone comes out and says, well, I'm not getting what I deserve, and they always compare it to the overall profit of the show, the album, or what have you. Now, if the show is making billions of dollars and you can barely feed yourself, I remember TLC kind of being in that position where the record producers and the money men were making millions of dollars off of their work, and they couldn't pay the rent. Like, that's a conversation.
That's different, yeah.
Especially when you are the product, right?
Right.
That's a conversation when you are the product. You know what I mean? Which is understandable. But if you are not the product, like TLC, it represented each one of their stage names. It represented their individual skill and maybe even their writing talents. If you watch the documentary on Wham, George Michael and Andy, I forget his last name, they had the same musical experience where they got the short end of the stick, and the record folks in the industry made significantly more money, but they were writing the music too. George Michael was writing the songs. Him and Andy were putting the music together. They were creating Wham. They are Wham. And someone else is making 90% of their intellectual property because of some documents. I understand that. Go fight the power. Go to it. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But if your argument is there aren't enough respectable roles in Hollywood or no one wants to hire me, well, there's other work. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Chappelle created Chappelle Show. That was his brain on TV,
Yeah.
So if he doesn't seem to find a lot of time to complain too much,
Right.
But if you're an actor in something, you're a skill set. I'm not giving you that. But if you didn't write it, and you're not directing it, and you didn't produce it, you're an employee.
That is fair.
And it's up to you, and you can decide what job you want to do. Why does that, and that's why that matters. Well, just clearing that up for the Hollywood Shuffle comparison, in that American Fiction, in its title, and it's based on the book Erasure. But when you watch the movie, you can be taken up by the part of it where he writes this book in broken English and full stereotype game, and he's being offered millions of dollars, book deals. But when we're talking about that part of the story, right? Just as you illustrated with the man wanting the book and so forth, everything in that section is about stereotypes.
Yes.
So the people who love the book are stereotypes.
Yes.
Just as the man you're talking about is a stereotype. The woman
Yes.
who originally wanted it, stereotype, right?
Right. Yes.
So everything about it is a stereotype.
Yeah.
That's juxtaposed, which actually is more important, is the juxtaposition of that to the story of his life,
Right.
which exists separately and independently from
Yeah.
from so it's a juxtaposition versus the stories about him writing this stupid book and
Right.
getting accolades. Because at the same time as you talk about this stereotypically homosexual man wanting the book, oh my god, da, da, da. Well,
Yeah.
his brother's homosexual,
Right. Right.
is a
Yeah.
homosexual plastic surgeon,
Yes.
and there's nothing
Mm-mm.
stereotypical about him. That's just
Nope.
he's playing his brother, right?
Right. Right.
And he's playing towards some of the challenges he had. One, parents never really knowing, his mother kind of rejecting the idea that he's gay, his father never knowing, his challenges with accepting himself. And
Right.
kind of it sort of finishes, he says, like, dad died without ever really knowing who I truly was,
Really. Mm-hmm.
and if he rejected me, at least I knew he would reject
Would
his
have
the
known.
real me.
Real me. Yeah.
And
Oh
that
yeah.
was heavy, that was deep. And
Yes.
the point of
Yeah.
and I would say the point of the juxtaposition was, while you may be selectively absorbing this controversial kind of edgy comedy little snapback at
Yeah.
stuff, here's this very here's this interesting story
Yeah.
playing right alongside it,
Mm-hmm.
where there are just real conversations going on.
Right.
And you know what, this entire story is relatable to everybody.
Yeah.
we
Oh
don't
yeah.
have to we don't have to force any image down your throat. This guy's dealing with the loss of a parent. No spoilers.
Loss of a
His,
relative.
his father is the passing of his father early on. So
Mm-hmm.
it's not a broken home in the state. It's a broken home in ways people can grasp
Yeah.
through, because his dad wasn't a great guy.
Right.
Mom had sympathy for dad. Mom's aging, developing dementia. His brother is successful but struggles with acceptance because of his sexual orientation. This might spoiler alert. His sister passes away from
Mm-hmm.
stress.
Yeah.
Um,
Trying to hold
you
the
know,
family together while the main
while being a
characters live in another area. Yeah.
and everything about her doctor, she was a doctor also, and everything she
Mm-hmm.
did in terms of a doctor is to be symbolized as
Was
someone who takes care
care
of
of those.
people, a doctor that actually cares
Mm-hmm.
about as many people as they can, and dies of a heart attack.
Mm-hmm.
And his
Yeah.
character is just like, you keep everybody at a distance. Why don't you bring people
Yeah.
closer? Like his walls and all that good stuff. Like it, the real story, the story of a family, the story of this man was not the comedy. It was like a calm drama, with some
Dramedy. Yeah.
lighthearted moments. And
Right.
you almost, when they shift into the family part and they show him dealing with his mother, his brother, his sisters,
Mm-hmm.
you know, dealing with other
Yeah.
people and just kind of going through the motions, you kind of forget about the joke. You
Yeah.
kind of forget about the social message and kind of get
And
enwrapped, and you kind of get wrapped in this tale that's like, damn, you know what I mean? Like,
yeah.
what would you
What's
do?
he gonna do? Right. And that's what
Yeah.
I was trying to figure out when you're watching it is the fact that how did it seem to you that they're showing him as a writer, but even with how I guess popular he'd been, he's still technically the black sheep of his own family. Hey, I'm an author, but I'm not a doctor because dad was an OBGYN, brother's a plastic surgeon. I think my sister's a family physician, and I'm just an author.
Who works at
Although, is
um,
it a university?
a version
Is
of Planned Parenthood.
yeah, yeah, yeah,
She's
yeah.
a
So
doctor at a clinic for contraception and parenting and things like that. Family
Right.
clinic.
Yeah. But so I was trying to say, that was one thing I thought was relatable too. Is you go home and you're technically the black sheep of your own family, even though everyone's like, well, hey, you've done all these things, and he does get some, I guess, some notification that hey, I've read your books, but it's still hey, like none of my family, my immediate family has. So I was like, well, hey,
Yeah.
what, how did it seem relatable to you to see that family dynamic of someone that other people know but is necessarily known to his own family? Was
Well,
there any?
being
Go ahead.
he was the one. The funny thing is, and it reminds me a little of you, is that everyone said at the end he was the most like dad.
Mm. Yeah, yeah,
Like everyone said it. His mother said, "Your father struggled with being alone." Because he asked his mother, he's like, "Why'd you stay with?"
what you
He's
say?
like, "Did you know Dad was being unfaithful?" And she was like, it's like, and if you knew, then why'd you stay with him? She said, "Because your father's lonely. He was lonely, and he was lonely because he was a genius." And she said, "Geniuses have a hard time connecting with people." And then she turns to him and says, "You're a genius, and you have a hard, you're just like him. You're a genius." And the thing is, our character, he's a writer, but he's a doctor. But he's not a doctor. He has a doctorate because his sister says, "Well, you're a doctor," and he's like, that not that
Not
kind
that
of
kind of
doctor,
doctor.
not that kind of doctor, right? So it has all those elements in there where
Yeah.
once at the end of the day, a great story is the story of being a human being. You know,
Yeah.
not about being a black guy or a black woman or a white guy or a white woman. About being a person, a human being, and knowing that even though, and check it out, his siblings did the doctor thing,
Yeah.
and his brother was not accepted because of his sexual orientation.
Right.
His sister, was she really accepted when she had to work so hard to keep the family together and
Right.
hold it all together? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Was Could mom have ever accepted anyone? You know, because
Right.
the mom, when he walks in, she gives him a hug and says, "You're getting fat.
Yeah.
Were you depressed?" She whispers in a dementia, in a weird state. She whispers to his brothers, like, "I always knew you weren't queer."
Queer.
And then the brother
Yeah.
walks away in tears.
Yeah.
And then they have her juxtaposed by the family, the maid, nanny,
Yeah.
housekeeper, whatever you want to call her,
Yes.
who's an employee selected
Mm-hmm.
by his father to work for them, and he's like, well, she's family.
Right.
And you could see that she cared or she understood them better
Their own
than
mother.
their own
Yeah.
parents, because she walks over to
Yeah.
Cliff and says, "You're always welcome. You're
Yeah.
family."
Yeah.
Like, and that moved him. You know what I mean?
Yeah. I thought that was one of the central scenes of the entire movie. Is he's wilding out because he feels like no one's really seeing him, or that if they do see him, they're going to reject him. And the nanny sees him in the worst possible state, and he's actually trying to hide the embarrassment. Like, hey, you're always welcome here. It's a wedding. We'll be ready for you when you're ready. And that kind of leads the way for him to have the discussion with his older brother about, seeing the real you and being open and honest about it and drawing people close with being that way. So, yeah, it was, I thought
And
that
they qualify.
was a really good juxtaposition. Go ahead.
And they qualified that scene about family when her new fiance, Maynard, says
Maynard.
it's always easier to
Other
deal with
people's.
other people's family, and then he turns to him and says, "In a few minutes, this is going to be your family," saying that your new wife isn't managing this well because it's not her family. She's managing it well as a member of the family. Does that make sense? So
Yes.
it's not
Yes, it does.
easier to deal with other people's family. She's doing what family's supposed to do.
Hmm. That was. I didn't think about that one.
It had these, like,
There's moments, yeah.
it had a lot of moments, like the woman who enjoyed his books. She thought his
I'm
books
sorry.
were brilliant. She loved his
Yeah.
books, right?
Yes.
Then he sees her with the fake book,
Yes.
and she says she likes it.
Yeah. And it was, and to be clear, it wasn't even something that she went out and bought. A friend, gave it to her. So that's that she was looking for this kind of book. But go ahead. I'm sorry.
So that in itself is like what does that mean? You know what I mean?
Right. Yes.
What does
Yes.
that mean about the expectation of excellence, which they talk about ad
Like
nauseum
Johnny Walker.
when they become when they all get together to offer the award, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And they're talking about excellence, and they're talking about um, good writing, and then they get his joke book, which he didn't. The most he tried to do was to make it sound as to make it sound as ratchet and as ghetto or just full of coonery buffoonery. And then and then these intellectuals instantly start talking about how it's so raw. That's what they say. It's raw.
Real.
It's so
Real.
real. And it's like,
Yeah.
and those are the words that matter. Raw and
Mm-hmm.
real. And
Right.
his story, as he's dealing with his family, is raw.
Is raw. Yeah.
And they're talking to the real person who doesn't sound like that, who doesn't act like that, you know?
Yeah.
So I enjoyed it as an overall commentary while still delivering an entertaining story
Mm-hmm.
that was deep and heartfelt,
Okay.
and
I mean,
still had its lighthearted moments.
well, I mean, there are two things I wanted to ask you about. I'll just the first one first. Early on in the movie, I know that when he's writing this Ratchet book and he sends it out to his publicist is like, no one's gonna want this, and he said that's the joke. Send it out anyway. And so he sends it out, and he gets like he gets one offer, but it's a huge amount. And so the writer Monk actually is the main character. He has a kind of a crisis at that moment. He's like, do I send out this ratchet ass book, or do I try to write something for what I'm known about? And so his publicist sits down with him and he gives him what's called, like, I want to call it the Johnny Walker explanation of things.
It is a
So
Johnny Walker explanation.
Johnny Walker explanation. All right, yeah. So Johnny Walker explanation is he pulls out Johnny Walker blue, red, and black, right?
Red, black, and
So
blue.
red, black, and blue. That's the order, yes. So he says to Monk, he's like, hey, the highest quality you can get is Johnny Walker Blue. It's great, but it's very expensive. Sometimes people just want Johnny Red and maybe a little bit of black. They just want to get completely trashed and have a good time, and that is it. It doesn't mean that just because you make blue that you can't make red and black. And so I wanted to get your thoughts on that explanation of things and if it was in any way relatable to any situations in which you've been.
Oh, that was just that was an in my opinion, that was a representation of every type of explanation that exists for the garbage of pandering to people's limited scope and limited point of view.
Okay. How?
Because when he meets the woman who says, "Well, I interviewed a lot of people to write my books." Oh, so
That was
you
question two. That was question
you
two.
didn't live the hood baby daddy life. You write about it. You we's are gonna be some kinds of you're doing the little voice and you're an Ivy League person with no personal I did interviews.
Right.
This is someone's real life somewhere, or a combination of people's real lives somewhere.
And
These
that
are
was my
all the explanations.
uh
So you got explanation, hey, you can do both. Then you got the explanation, this is happening to somebody somewhere, right?
I might as well tell it. I mean,
You know what I mean?
yeah, and I don't mean to cut him off of this because it actually bleeds right into the second question I was going to ask him because it goes to a point where he gets the inspiration to write this kind of a mock book because the another character named Centaura writes this really trash ghetto book called Weesby in the Ghetto, right? And so he finds out about her at this kind of like a book con, and she's reading these. It's just terrible grammar. It's awful. It's just like Osby's pregnant, and if Osby's pregnant the third time, this time Tyrone really gonna be your daddy. And just everyone's just standing up applauding about how real and raw it is, and so that's what inspires him to write this mock book. And I'm not gonna tell you what the name of the book is because you'll find out it's hilarious in one part and then it gets hysterical the second time. But at some point, he's actually in the room with this author, and they're trying to figure out if his fake book deserves to be like the number one book of the year, or whatever. So amongst having this conversation with Santara, he's like, "How is the book that you don't like, which is technically the book that I wrote, any better than the book that you wrote?" And she actually winds up giving an explanation for it. So that was the second question: is how did you feel about her explanation as opposed to him questioning her when they're kind of writing the same material?
Well, that's the other part. That's the another rationalization, right?
Mm-hmm. Right.
She can rationalize why she's done it, right?
Right.
But when presented with the exact same thing from someone else, she judges it honestly to her talent, her knowledge, and her ability. And she basically says it's trash.
Yeah.
But when she's approached about being a participant in it, right?
Right.
She has all these justifications.
Yeah.
Well, what's wrong with playing the market? Well, if this is what people want, why can't we
Why
give
not
it to
give it
them?
to
And
them?
it's like,
Right. You're
but you
participating in it.
just
Yeah.
said like less than a second ago that it
It's
wasn't a
trash.
good thing.
Right.
But when it's pointed at you, you've got all these reasons that are reasonable. And he makes a
Right.
statement about there's a line where he says something about, what about our potential, the potential? And then she has this
Right.
counterpoint where it's like potential is a statement when something
It can't
you
succeed,
don't,
or they don't think it's going to succeed, or something like that.
or there's something you don't like in front of you that isn't, or whatever, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And it's sort of this illustration of all this hypocrisy, inconsistency. Um, just, I think it comes down to, let's go with our juxtaposition. Look at his family, right?
Right.
These are the people, his family may represent the community at large,
Okay.
right?
Okay.
You're all family, right?
Right.
And they're not family. They're all together, but they're not together because Cliff says,
But
the gay brother says, um,
this family
says
breaks my
to
heart.
his new girlfriend, "You join this family will find a way to break your heart." Right.
That was a tough hitting. That's a tough hitting
So
line. Yes.
so we got one person trying to hold the family together while she dies under the stress.
Right.
You got somebody who ran from the family who's come back to try and hold it together because he thinks there's more that the family can be held together, but it's more than the sum of its parts, which is our hero, right?
Right.
Then you got the brother who's in the family. He's lived up to the expectations. He is not
Expectations.
accepted for who he truly is. You know what I mean?
Right.
And he's semi self destructive, trying to manage who he really is versus
Just
like
being him.
all the
Yeah.
expectations and everything else. He doesn't feel accepted. So when we move back to the story, right?
Right.
The fake story, the fake tale, the whole not being recognized for just being a good author, only being recognized because he capitulates to expectation, right?
Right.
But his brother capitulated to expectation,
Right.
and he was still not accepted for who he truly is, right?
Right.
So it's like I write these great books. I'm a good author. Even when he was a university professor, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
One of the first things he runs into is he's a black man asking people to read a book that has the N word across the title, and it's a period piece. It's about
Yeah.
literature. It's about whatever.
Right.
And a young Caucasian woman says that she's offended. She's offended.
She's not comfortable reading the
And
word
so
the N word.
his line for which he says in anger to her, because it demonstrates that he became very frustrated with
Right.
her point of view and everything else, is, "I've gotten over it. I think you should too."
You too. Yeah.
Not to say that it's a good or bad thing. It's to say we can't get anywhere while everybody's living in their own heads, you know.
Right.
Um, and it kind of plays with this idea that um, it really just makes you ask yourself, what's really important?
Right.
You know?
Yeah.
What does it really matter, right?
Yeah.
So let's say you are a hardworking genius and you've done everything to be respected and you provide people this thing that they say they want
Right.
because they put it out there. You want respect,
Right.
notoriety. You're a genius. You know, he gets put on a
Yeah.
council to award the best writers for writing really smart stuff. You got all these people talking about how smart and intellectual and great everything is, right?
Right.
You got doctors that are saving lives and whatever, right?
Right.
His dad's an OBGYN who was cheating on his wife, doing house calls. His brother's a doctor, but he's a cosmetic surgeon who uses drugs, who snorts
Yeah.
cocaine. And when he asks him, he's like, "Well, you're a doctor," and he's like, "Yeah, so I can prescribe oxycodone."
Yeah.
He's like, "Legal heroin." His sister, well, part of the heart attack was he was like, "Why'd you start smoking again?" And she was a smoker, right?
Yeah. And she was suffering under the stress of I lost half of everything in the divorce.
Right.
I, yeah.
And it's about playing with, and in my opinion, you know, and you look at the title, American
American
fiction,
fiction. Yeah.
right?
Right.
We live in a world where there's this thing I say I want, right?
Mm-hmm. Right.
There's this there's this game you're supposed to play, right? There's this formula that's supposed to work, right?
Right.
But does it? When you give the people what they ask, when you give the people, and that's important about giving the people what they ask for when she talks about the market, right?
Yes. Yes.
The people ask for college degrees. They ask for intelligent content.
Right.
They ask because the person offering the biggest offer for the book rejected his former books.
Yes.
And they
Yes.
introduced his girlfriend, the lawyer character, a lawyer who says they're brilliant. So we have this intelligent person who
Mm-hmm.
recognizes his genius and says it's good. He works for
Right.
a university, so he is
Recognized for his
everything
merits.
this
Yeah.
publisher should have wanted in the first place.
Right.
And she didn't want it until it was
Right.
stereotypical garbage.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Right.
It wasn't interesting until the black man who was writing it was supposed to have been an ex-con on the run
On the run.
from the
Yeah.
street. But when it's a college educated suburban black man from Boston who's the son of a doctor, and they never really get into his mother's profession, but they say it's a family of doctors, right?
Mm-hmm. Right.
Well, his work is never good enough. But it's
Right.
like, but this is what you asked for, right?
Right.
So we do ask for a lot of stuff.
Oh yeah.
And then you're delivered that stuff, and then you don't want it. Now, here's the other part. The market is moving in a way to demonstrate what people really want
Really want.
or seem to want,
Mm-hmm.
which is based on a lie,
Right.
right?
Right.
And it's based on a narrative that is untrue.
Right.
And that narrative in particular is counter the request for civilized life.
Okay.
Wrap your head around that.
For
So
people that
we
got
want people to
lost in that
be.
sauce, can you give a
Here we
little
go.
explanation
You
on
ready?
that one? I
You
said,
ready? Because Diego's
go
about to
ahead.
sit down for this one. Hold on.
Because
This
people might have
cave
got
is very
lost in the
dark.
sauce.
I'm sorry. Lost in the Andes.
For those that got lost in the sauce, or Diego Orlando is about to break this down with a real world example. Go ahead, sir.
This is how ludicrous things have gotten.
Luda. Sorry. Go ahead.
Lud- You ask for something. Use your mouth, use your words, and you say, hey, here's your example. I want safer streets. I
Okay.
want better schools.
Okay.
Right?
Right.
Cool. That's what you
Cool.
ask for. Right?
Right. Right.
So when efforts to bring about safer streets, better schools, we don't want that. We reject it. Not good enough. It's not really what we're looking for. Right?
Right.
Okay, cool. Okay, cool. Maybe. So then we go to the market, right?
Right.
And the market seems to show an interest in the opposite direction.
Okay.
You know, I want what I'm buying the narrative that my streets are less safe and that my schools are bad. I'm buying into it. Does that make sense?
Yes.
So I'm almost paying for the schools to be worse and the streets to be less safe.
Oh. Okay. I see where
But
you're
do I
going.
really want worse schools and less safe streets? No, no, no. I don't want. I don't act. They really don't want that either, right?
No. Right.
That's what fuels the desire to ask for it. I'm asking for the safe stuff because things aren't safe, but I'm buying into the lack of safety, which keeps things unsafe. So I can keep asking for things to be unsafe.
Safe. Yeah.
Hear the cycle?
I do. Yes. It's
Because
very
what
much is
happens
reverse.
if I get what I ask for? Then I lose my reason to ask for it.
Ask for it.
And then I get peace.
That's true.
And how do I feel about peace? So they look, now we go to our writer character, right?
Right.
His relationship's going well. He's got the girlfriend.
Yes.
He's about to get paid. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah.
And what does he do when he gets what he wants?
He blows it up.
He burns it all to the ground.
Yeah.
And that's when his brother Cliff tells him, like, he's like, let people want to love you, let them
Yes.
love you.
Let them love you. Yeah.
You know, what I drew from it mainly, outside of the surface trailer stuff, is um you're shortchanging yourself a lot of the time in life. You know,
Mm-hmm.
yeah, some of the stuff does some stuff exists, but that stuff has never proven to be insurmountable in the story of the human experience.
Thank you for joining us for another episode of Left Eye of Justice. We're gonna keep doing this as often as we can. Just look out for more notifications for it. But for Diego Orlando reporting from somewhere and E.G.O, guys, we are out.